That's later, but first tonight, the berry contamination crisis that's making people sick and raising the issue of double standards. While local producers are forced to meet strict quality and safety measures, their standards foreign growers simply aren't following. Rodney Lose explores why and how they're getting away with it.
If they're following the same process that we are, which is an industry body now, and they're all made to go through it, very, very unlikely that we'll see this in Australia.
They are not subject to anything like the accreditation and rules that we are subject to.
So these recent incidents really emphasise the fact that we need to be a bit more protective around the kind of imported produce that's reaching our shelves.
Australians consume more than $1.5 billion worth of imported fruit and vegetables each year. And every year that amount increases at the expense of Aussie producers.
Imports are definitely part of the fruit and vegetable industry here. We've just had results come in from 2013-14 which showed that imports were up 12%. And if you looked at gross value of domestic versus imports, you'd find that imports represent about 20% of the value. So it is significant.
But AUSVEG SA State Manager Jordan Brooke-Barnett says just how safe that product is a lucky dip, and the odds are stacked against you.
They test around 5% of the produce only, so we think that's horribly low.
And even of the products tested, many chemicals banned in Australia aren't tested for. Previous investigations by Today Tonight have revealed questionable hygiene, foreign farms using human effluent as fertiliser, and scientific testing found traces of the fungicide cyprodinil and the chemical boscalid in beans imported from Belgium. In the same tests, the highly toxic fungicide procimidone was found in this bag of beans from New Zealand.
It's been shown to cause birth defects, and in fact the regulator recently updated label instructions to make sure that pregnant women or women of childbearing age actually don't come in contact with the chemical.
We found the same chemicals 9 months earlier in this bag of winter vegetables. 10% were from China, the rest from New Zealand. The organophosphate parathon methyl was found. Sixth-generation farmer Mike Baddock says it's banned in Australia.
And we haven't really used that product for a long time in Australia. But to have these products come into Australia with it in there, it is very disappointing.
Imported frozen raspberries were tested. 2 of the 6 bags contained traces of pyroclostrobin and difenoconazole.
What that means is that those pesticides in Australia can't be used on berries.
Contamination, as seen in the past week and as we've uncovered previously, is near impossible in Australian-grown product due to the rigorous reporting and testing done on every Aussie farm.
That all starts from, I guess, the amount of paperwork which is done daily, whether that's through our weights, through diaries that are having to be kept.
Hamilton Walker is one of the largest strawberry growers in the country. He says if Chinese producers were forced to do the same checks and balances he was on his Adelaide Hills farm, he can almost guarantee the current hepatitis scare wouldn't have happened. But he says the imported berries probably wouldn't be as cheap either.
These sort of things could be controlled if everyone was under the same specifications that we have to follow.
The locally grown fruit is so carefully grown, harvested, tested and marketed so that the introduced fruit can be sold at a much lower price, and it isn't clear to the consumer how much more safety they have in purchasing the local fruit.
Helen Dawson is one of the few Australian frozen berry producers left in the country. She spends a small fortune every year proving her South Australian grown berries are clean.
There is a rigid accreditation via people like Freshcare and HACCP, and to comply with that I mustn't use anything that I don't say I use.
Demand for her Sylvan berries, a hybrid blackberry, outweighs her supply. But she says she's watched cheap imports send many local growers out of business. What upsets Helen the most is many Australians don't even realise they're eating imported, potentially hazardous product.
I think it's hard for people to understand the difference between product of Australia and grown in Australia. And in some value-added products, like preserves, you can put on there made from grown and imported produce. But in fact, it can be made entirely from imported fruit, and the local component can be sugar.
It's why our local industry wants labelling laws changed.
Because right now it's not clear. Even if consumers wanted to avoid produce from China, they couldn't necessarily do it. Because a lot of the food manufacturers use what I can only describe as weasel words. So they might have on the back of the packet using local, it's a product of New Zealand or product of Australia using local imported ingredients. But what we don't know is the percentage of imported ingredients, what they are and where they came from.
As crazy as it sounds, product of Australia can mean many of the ingredients are from overseas, and even product of New Zealand can mean ingredients are from China.
We think there needs to be nationally consistent legislation backed by enforcement that doesn't try and hide this fact from consumers. We need it on the front of the packet and we need it clear as daylight.
The Greens and independent South Australian Senator Nick Xenophon have proposed new labelling legislation. AUSVEG SA says the time for debate is over.
Recent incidents like this berry incidents are a watershed moment for our industry. I mean, you can talk about something for years and it only sits in the hypothetical space. What the last week has really driven home is that there is a real risk here. We've been saying there's a real risk here, so now the ball's in the government's court and they can respond to that.
It's frustrating though, isn't it? Rodney Lose there. Now, taking on big corporations such as Telstra can often be a